But Teddy wouldn't ghost her. He stepped in front of Eleanor, his growls sounding like a literal chainsaw starting up in the quiet woods. Just as the goons stepped closer, a loud, soul-piercing whistle echoed through the trees from every direction. Out of the shadows stepped a group of old-timers, the local veterans of Oak Ridge, led by none other than the sheriff's retired father, holding a double-barrel shotgun. They were all holding cameras and phones, recording everything in high definition. "Looks like you boys are tripping on private property," the old man said, his voice as icy as a winter morning. "And we're currently live-streaming this whole situation to the town's Facebook group and the state police. Say cheese for the internet." The goons froze in their tracks. They knew they were caught in 4K, and there was no way out.
They didn't want to catch a felony on camera with 30 witnesses watching, so they scrambled back into their SUV and peeled out, leaving Eleanor and Teddy in a massive cloud of dust and victory.
"You guys, you saved us! How did you even know we were here?" Eleanor gasped, leaning against her car and catching her breath. "Nah, Eleanor," the old man smiled, pointing a gnarled finger at Teddy. "This little guy alerted us. He ran to my porch an hour before you even left the motel, barked like the world was ending until I followed him, and led us right to this spot. He knew you'd be here before you did. He's the real goat." Eleanor looked at Teddy, her eyes filling with tears of pure gratitude. "You really are built different, aren't you, buddy?" But the final boss was still waiting back in town. Sterling was probably at the sheriff's office right now, trying to buy his way out of the mess or bribe the city council to delete the records. Eleanor grabbed the file and hopped back into the driver's seat. "Let's go, Teddy. It's time to cancel Mr. Sterling once and for all and take back our town." As they drove toward town, Eleanor noticed a small hidden pocket inside the leather folder she hadn't seen before in her rush. She pulled out a tiny silver USB drive with a label that made her blood run cold. Sterling's secret ledger. This wasn't just about land or mineral rights anymore. This was federal-level tea that went all the way to the state capitol. The destiny Teddy was guarding was much bigger than just a house. It was the truth. 6 months had passed since the Great Sterling shutdown, and the vibe in Oak Ridge was at an all-time high. The town was no longer under the thumb of a greedy billionaire, and the new Teddy Hero Park was officially under construction. Grandma Eleanor's new house was nearly finished. A gorgeous modern Victorian built on the same spot as the old one, but with top-tier security and a backyard that was basically a doggy Disneyland. "Can you believe it, Teddy? We really went from ashes to a mansion," Eleanor said, watching the painters put the final coat of aesthetic white on the porch. Teddy was lounging on a custom-made outdoor sofa, looking like a total boss. He had become a local celebrity. People would stop by just to drop off organic treats or take a selfie with the dog who canceled Sterling. But even with all the clout, Teddy hadn't lost his edge. He was still the same detective at heart. While the contractors were finishing the basement, the only part of the original house that hadn't been completely leveled, Teddy started acting sus again. He began hanging out near the old stone foundation walls, sniffing the mortar, and let out these low, ghostly whines that gave Eleanor the chills. "Not again, Teddy. My heart can't handle another secret safe discovery," Eleanor joked. But her gut told her this wasn't a joke. One afternoon, while the workers were on their lunch break, Teddy started going ham on a loose stone behind the new furnace. He was digging and scratching with such main character energy that Eleanor grabbed a crowbar to help him out. "If this is just a squirrel, you are so canceled for the day, buddy," she muttered as she pried the stone loose. The stone popped out, revealing not a box of ice or cash, but something way more mysterious. It was an old, vacuum-sealed VHS tape and a heavy brass compass that pointed toward the mountains behind the house, even though they were nowhere near north. "A VHS tape? That is so retro," Eleanor said, dusting it off. She ran to the local thrift store, grabbed a dusty VCR,
and hooked it up to her 70-inch 4K TV. The screen flickered with static before a grainy image of Silas appeared. He looked younger, maybe in his 40s, and he looked stressed out. Eleanor, if you're seeing this, it means the house is gone, and the protector has revealed himself, Silas said on the tape, his voice sounding crunchy through the old speakers. The gold and the diamonds were just a starter pack. The real destiny of our family isn't in the box. It's in the silver mine at Eagle's Peak. But listen close. The Sterling family wasn't working alone. There's a shadow group trying to get to the mine, and they've been tracking our bloodline for 80 years. Eleanor felt her blood run icy. The mystery didn't end with Sterling. It was just the tip of the iceberg. The dog, Silas continued, looking directly into the camera, isn't just a pet. He's the key. He knows the way because he's been trained by the frequency of the compass. Follow him, Eleanor. Don't let the shadows get there first. Stay woke and trust the dog. The tape cut to static. Eleanor sat there, totally shook. She looked at Teddy, who was sitting perfectly still, staring at the brass compass, which was now spinning like a fidget spinner. So, the fire wasn't just an accident, or a small-time land grab, Eleanor realized, her mind doing gymnastics. It was a hit, by someone way bigger than Sterling, and they're still out there, lurking in the shadows. Just then, the vibe changed. Outside the house, a fleet of black, high-tech SUVs, much sleeker and more menacing than Sterling's, pulled up to the gates. Men in tactical gear stepped out, looking like they stepped straight out of a Call of Duty lobby. They were professionals. Teddy, we're being raided, Eleanor gasped. Teddy didn't panic. He grabbed the brass compass in his mouth and headed for the back door, the one leading to the mountain trail. He looked back at Eleanor with a look that said, "Buckle up, Grandma. It's time for the sequel." You gotta be kidding, Eleanor groaned, grabbing her hiking boots and her heavy-duty flashlight. I'm 80 years old. When do I get to just rot on the couch and watch my soaps? But she wasn't actually mad. She felt that spark again. She and Teddy slipped out the back just as the front door was kicked in with a loud boom. They disappeared into the forest, heading toward Eagle's Peak. The destiny was moving to the mountains, and the stakes were now sky high. If we survive this, Teddy, I'm getting you a gold-plated dog bowl, Eleanor panted as they hit the steep trail. Teddy just wagged his tail and kept his eyes on the trail. The hunt was on, the villains were upgraded, and the goat was ready for war. The night air was chilly as Eleanor and Teddy slipped through the dense pine trees behind her new home. Behind them, she could hear the heavy boots of the tactical goons crunching through the brush, their flashlights cutting through the dark like lightsabers. These guys weren't amateurs like Sterling's crew. They were sweaty tryhards who clearly knew how to track. They're thirsty for that map, Teddy, but we're the ones with the home court advantage, Eleanor whispered, her breath hitching in the cold. Teddy was in full stealth mode. He wasn't barking or making a sound. He was just a golden shadow moving through the ferns, occasionally stopping to sniff the air and scout the safest path. Eleanor followed him, clutching the vintage map and a heavy-duty flashlight she'd grabbed at the last second. According to Silas's map, the entrance to the ghost mine was hidden behind a waterfall near the Eagle's Peak, a place the locals thought was cursed and stayed away from. It was a trek that would be tough for a young hiker, let alone an 80-year-old lady, but Eleanor felt like she had infinite stamina tonight. We're almost at the ridge, buddy, she panted, looking back. The goons were still on their tail, but they were struggling with the steep incline. Suddenly, the sound of rushing water filled the air. They reached the waterfall, a massive curtain of white foam crashing into a rocky pool. Teddy didn't hesitate. He walked right along a slippery ledge behind the water. You gotta be kidding me, Teddy. I'm gonna get soaked, Eleanor groaned, but she followed him anyway. Behind the falls was a dark, damp cavern that looked like it hadn't been touched since the 40s. Eleanor clicked on her light, and the cave walls started glistening. It wasn't just wet rock. There were actual veins of gold running through the stone like glitter on a craft project. "Silas, you weren't joking. This place is a literal gold mine," she breathed, her jaw hitting the floor again. But the vibe check came fast. A voice echoed from the entrance of the cave, cold and robotic. "Drop the map, Eleanor. It's over. You're out of moves," the lead goon said, stepping through the waterfall with his gear looking shiny and expensive. He had a laser sight pointed right at the map in her hand. Eleanor stood her ground, her heart thumping. "You think you can just invade our town and steal what belongs to us? You're tripping if you think I'm handing this over." The goon smirked. "We don't care about the town. We care about the bag. And you're just a boomer standing in the way of $1 billion payday." He stepped closer, but Teddy moved in front of Eleanor, letting out a growl that sounded like pure thunder. The cave amplified the sound, making it bone-chilling. Just as the goon reached for the folder, Teddy didn't attack the man. He jumped up and pulled a rusty lever on the wall that Eleanor hadn't even noticed. Rumble. Crack. A massive iron gate, hidden in the ceiling, crashed down between Eleanor and the goon, sealing the entrance. The goon was clapped on the other side, shouting and banging against the bars, but he was stuck. "You're a genius!" Eleanor cheered, hugging the dog. But now they were trapped inside the mine, with only one way to go, deeper into the mountain. Eleanor looked at the map again and saw a second exit, labeled "The Founder's Escape." "Looks like we're going on an underground adventure, buddy," she said, her voice echoing in the tunnels. "But we gotta be careful. Who knows what other traps Silas left behind to keep the snakes out." As they walked deeper, Teddy stopped and pointed his nose toward a wooden crate in the corner. On top of it was an old, dusty radio transmitter that was still blinking with a faint red light. "Someone's already infiltrated the mine, Teddy," Eleanor whispered, her blood running cold. "And it's not just the goons behind us. There's a traitor in the town who's been pinging our location the whole time." The atmosphere inside the mine was mad creepy. The only thing Eleanor could hear was the steady drip-drop of water from the ceiling, and the rhythmic electronic ping of that dusty radio transmitter. Teddy was standing perfectly still, his ears twitching like high-tech radar dishes. He wasn't just sniffing for gold anymore. He was sniffing for a snake. "If someone's been pinging our location, Teddy, that means the call is coming from inside the house," Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the cave. "Someone we trust is faking the funk and trying to sell us out." She leaned down and picked up the transmitter. Taped to the bottom was a small laminated badge with a name that made her heart drop through the floor. It wasn't Mr. Sterling. It wasn't some random goon. It was Deputy Miller, the sheriff's right-hand man and the guy who had brought her donated blankets after the fire. "Miller? You gotta be kidding me! He seems so wholesome!" Eleanor gasped, her brain doing mental gymnastics to process the betrayal. "He wasn't helping us because he's a real one. He was just scouting the location so he could scoop the gold for himself. He's the ultimate fraud." Teddy let out a disrespectful huff, clearly agreeing that Miller was canceled for life. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, and a voice, Miller's voice, echoed through the tunnel, sounding cold and robotic. "Team Bravo, status update. The old lady and the mutt are trapped behind the gate. I'm entering through the back door at the summit. I want that gold secured before the state police show up. If the dog gets in the way, delete him." Eleanor felt a wave of pure rage wash over her. "Oh, he's tweaking if he thinks he's touching a single hair on your head, Teddy." They began speed-walking deeper into the labyrinth. The mine was sketchy. Old wooden supports were rotting away, and the floor was dodgy, with deep cracks that looked like they led straight to the center of the earth. Teddy was leading the charge, jumping over gaps and sniffing out the safest path with elite precision. They reached a massive underground chamber that looked like a secret base from an old spy movie. In the center was a huge iron safe, bolted into the bedrock with heavy-duty chains. This was the main stash Silas had mentioned in the VHS tape. But instead of a combination lock, there was a small, dog-sized pressure plate on the floor, and a keyhole for the silver key Eleanor was still clutching. "It's a two-man job, Teddy. You gotta stand on the plate while I turn the key." Silas really thought of everything, Eleanor realized, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Teddy stepped onto the plate with main character energy, and Eleanor jammed the key in. Clunk, whir, shh! The safe door swung open, revealing not just more gold, but a mountain of digital files and paper evidence against every corrupt official in the state, including Miller. Silas had been collecting receipts his whole life, waiting for a dog smart enough and a woman brave enough to find them. "We got the ultimate tea, Teddy. This isn't just a payday. This is a nuke for every dirty politician in the county," Eleanor cheered, grabbing the most important folder. But then the sound of a helicopter started thumping outside the cave's hidden exit at the top of the chamber. The final boss had arrived. Through the founder's escape door, a heavy stone slab, they could see Miller stepping out of a sleek black chopper, holding a high-tech scanner. He looked mad-pressed and desperate. "Eleanor, I know you're in there," Miller's voice boomed through a megaphone, bouncing off the cave walls. The friendly deputy act was just a marketing stunt. "Give me the files and the gold, and I'll let you and the dog walk away. Otherwise, we're sealing this mine for good and calling it a tragic accident." A group of his men started setting explosives around the cave's mouth. They were going to bury Eleanor and Teddy alive to keep the corruption hidden. "He's bugging out if he thinks we're just gonna sit here and take it," Eleanor shouted, her eyes blazing with fire. Teddy looked at Eleanor, then at a pile of old, dusty mining equipment in the corner of the safe. He nudged a small handheld detonator toward her. It was connected to a series of old flares Silas had rigged up years ago. "You want me to light 'em up?" Eleanor asked, a wild smile spreading across her face. "All right, Miller. You wanted a show. Let's give you a spectacle." Teddy grabbed the heavy bag of evidence in his teeth, and Eleanor prepped the flare blast. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were going full offensive to take back their town's honor. The vibe inside the underground chamber was straight-up cinematic. The air was thick with the smell of old iron, ancient dust, and danger, while the rhythmic thumping of Miller's helicopter blades outside felt like a heartbeat of doom. Eleanor looked at the flare detonator in her hand, then at Teddy, who was standing firm, clutching the bag of shady documents in his teeth, like an absolute beast. "Miller thinks we're finished, Teddy, but he doesn't know we're about to break the internet with his secrets," Eleanor whispered, her thumb hovering over the button. "He's about to find out that you don't mess with an 80-year-old woman and her goat dog." Outside, Miller was bugging out, screaming through his megaphone for his goons to prime the charges. He wanted to delete the evidence and Eleanor along with it, so he could go back to being the town's hero. But Eleanor had noticed a low-key detail on the map Silas left behind. A secondary pressure valve that would cause a controlled release of built-up gas, creating a massive but harmless smokescreen. "All right, buddy, on the count of 3, we send it," Eleanor yelled over the roar of the chopper. 1, 2, 3. Boom! The explosion didn't just shake the cave, it sent a massive cloud of white smoke and glittering gold dust flying out of the cave's mouth, blinding Miller's men. In the confusion, Eleanor and Teddy dashed through the smoke like ninjas. Miller's goons were clueless, coughing and stumbling around in the sparkling fog, while Teddy used his elite senses to weave through the chaos toward the landing pad. "Hey, Miller, your subscription to being a good guy just expired," Eleanor screamed as she emerged from the smoke, looking absolutely iconic with soot on her face and a fire in her eyes. Miller looked shook. He tried to scramble into the chopper, but Teddy was faster than a 5G connection.
The dog lunged forward and grabbed Miller's expensive leather briefcase, the one containing the remote access to the city's private servers, and yeeted it right into the rocky waterfall pool below. "You stupid mutt," Miller shrieked, looking totally clapped and pathetic. But it was too late to save face. Teddy wasn't done flexing. He dropped the bag of Silas's evidence at the feet of a high-altitude news drone that had been low-key hovering nearby, following the heat signatures from the mountain. Everything, the bribery, the corruption, Miller's shady threats, was being live-streamed to the entire world in 4K resolution. "The whole world is watching you, Miller," Eleanor laughed, leaning against a rock, as the state police sirens finally began to echo through the valley. "You tried to gatekeep the truth, but you just leaked your own downfall." Miller's final boss energy evaporated instantly. He fell to his knees as the tactical team swarmed the area, clamping his wrists in cuffs. The betrayal was over, and the hero of the night wasn't a politician or a billionaire. It was a stray dog who was simply built different. But as the police were clearing the scene, Teddy didn't go for a victory lap. He stood by the edge of a deeper, darker shaft in the mine that hadn't been opened yet. He let out a haunting howl that echoed across the peaks, sounding almost like a signal. "What is it, Teddy? Is there more?" Eleanor asked, her heart skipping a beat. Teddy nudged her toward a small hidden time capsule that had been dislodged by the smoke blast. Inside was a photo of Silas, a younger Eleanor, and a dog that looked exactly like Teddy. On the back, it said, "The gold is for the town, but the bond is for eternity. The protector will always return when the destiny calls." Eleanor realized then that Teddy wasn't just a guardian of the gold, he was a legacy of love. But just as they were about to head home to celebrate, a mysterious black car with government plates, different from the goons, pulled up. A woman in a dark suit stepped out, looking extra serious. "Mrs. Eleanor, we're from the Department of Ancient Secrets," she said, her voice icy. "That mine you just opened? It's not just a gold mine. It's a portal to something we've been tracking for 80 years. And your dog? He's the only one who can close it." "Oh, you gotta be kidding me," Eleanor groaned. "We're really doing a sci-fi twist now?" "I just wanted to go home and eat some pudding." Teddy let out a determined bark. The ultimate finale was about to begin, and it was going to be out of this world. The atmosphere at the top of Eagle's Peak had gone from a police bust to a straight-up sci-fi movie set. The air around that hidden mineshaft started to thrum with a weird violet energy that made the hair on Eleanor's arms stand up, like she'd just rubbed a balloon on her head. The woman from the Department of Ancient Secrets, Agent Vance, looked like she had zero time for small talk. "Listen, Grandma, I know you just wanted to vibe and enjoy your retirement, but that dog of yours just unlocked a Pandora's box of ancient tech," Vance said, her eyes fixed on a glowing console inside her black SUV. Silas wasn't just a record keeper. He was a gatekeeper, and that mine, it's sitting on a tectonic frequency rift that's been dormant since 1945. Eleanor looked at Teddy, who was staring into the purple glow of the shaft with a look of absolute focus. He didn't look like a scruffy stray anymore. He looked like a warrior king, ready to take back his throne. "You're telling me Silas was guarding a portal?" Eleanor asked, her brain doing extreme gymnastics. "And let me guess, if we don't close it, the whole town gets deleted from the map?" "Worse," Vance replied, looking dead serious. "If that rift stays open, it'll glitch the entire regional power grid and basically send us back to the Stone Age. We need a biological key to reset the core. It has to be a protector of the golden bloodline." She pointed at Teddy. "He's the only one who can enter the zero zone and stay woke enough to hit the reset." Teddy let out a soul-shaking bark. He didn't wait for a motivational speech. He grabbed the brass compass in his teeth and headed straight for the glowing violet rift. "Teddy, wait! You can't just yeet yourself into a portal!" Eleanor screamed, her heart shattering into a million pieces. "We're a team, Remember, we slay together. But Vance blocked her path. If you go in there, Eleanor, your molecules will literally turn into glitter. Only he can handle the static. Eleanor watched, tears streaming down her face, as Teddy stepped into the light. For a second, the whole mountain went dead silent. Then, a wave of pure golden energy exploded outward, knocking everyone to the ground. The purple glow turned into a massive pillar of white light that shot up into the stars, visible for hundreds of miles. Inside the light, Eleanor saw a vision, a high-definition silhouette, of Silas standing next to a younger version of Teddy. Silas was smiling, and he gave a small, chill salute before the light started to fade. "He's doing it," Vance whispered, looking at her scanners. "The frequency is normalizing. The rift is closing the tab." Crack boom. With a sound like a giant vault closing, the violet energy snapped shut. The mineshaft collapsed in on itself, sealing the secrets of Eagle's Peak forever. The mountain was quiet again, just the sound of the wind and the distant sirens of the state police. Eleanor fell to her knees in the dirt, sobbing. "He's gone. My boy is ghosted. He sacrificed himself to save us all." The townspeople who had gathered at the base of the mountain were silent. The news drones were still circling, but the vibe was heavy and somber. Even Agent Vance looked low-key emotional as she started packing up her gear. A small, familiar sneeze echoed from the dusty remains of the cave entrance. Out of the smoke and rubble walked a very dusty, very tired, but very much alive Teddy. In his mouth, he wasn't carrying gold or files anymore. He was carrying a small, vintage locket that Eleanor had lost 50 years ago, the one Silas had given her on their wedding day. "Teddy, you absolute legend!" Eleanor shrieked, sprinting toward him and scooping him up into the biggest hug of all time. "You survived! You really are built different." Teddy wagged his tail so hard he nearly lifted off like a helicopter. He had closed the portal, saved the town, and brought back the only piece of jewelry that actually mattered to Eleanor. He was the goat of all goats. 1 month later, Oak Ridge had undergone a total glow-up. With Sterling and Miller behind bars and the corrupt city council canceled for good, the town was thriving. The gold Silas had left in the safe was used to build the Teddy Hero Sanctuary, the world's most aesthetic and high-tech shelter for stray dogs. Eleanor's new house was finally finished, and it was a masterpiece. On the front lawn stood a life-sized bronze statue of Teddy, with a plaque that read, "The Protector. He knew too much, but he loved even more." Eleanor sat on her porch in a rocking chair, sipping tea and watching Teddy play with a group of rescued puppies in the yard. The Department of Ancient Secrets had left them alone, but they'd sent a small, gold-plated collar for Teddy as a thank you for not letting the world blow up. "You know, Teddy," Eleanor said, looking out at the sunset over Eagle's Peak, "life was pretty mid before you showed up. But now, we're living the dream." Teddy looked up, his eyes sparkling with that same I-know-a-secret look. He let out a happy, victorious woof and settled down at her feet. Their destiny was no longer a mystery. It was a reality. And in the town of Oak Ridge, the story of the dog and the grandma would be trending forever.